I'm Father Robert Lauder, priest of the Diocese of Brooklyn, professor of philosophy at St. John's University. Today we continue our series on the Catholic novel with Evelyn Waugh's Brideshead Revisited. I consider this novel a masterpiece, but I had an interesting history with it. I read it in either first or second year college, and that was when I was just beginning to read Catholic novels. I had read a number by Graham Greene, and then I heard about this one and I read it. I had the very difficult time getting through the first section. It didn't seem to be going anywhere, and it didn't seem to have very many attractive people in it. And then later I heard a college professor make a similar statement. But once you got into the heart of the novel, it is a magnificent novel. I teach this course at St. John's University, Philosophy and Literature, and I do 8 or 9 Catholic novels. And for several years, when I assigned Brideshead Revisited, a girl who went on to get her doctorate in English told me, "You have to drop that novel. Nobody is getting the point. Some of the students aren't reading it. You really have to drop it." But I couldn't. I couldn't see how I would teach a course on the Catholic novel and not include Brideshead Revisited. And then I came upon a really excellent essay by Robert Barron, then Father Robert Barron, now Bishop Robert Barron. And he really opened up the book for me and also for my students. Every semester I teach the course, I have them read this essay by Robert Barron, and it is just terrific. What Barron says is Brideshead Castle is the main character in the novel. And of course, Brideshead is from St. Paul's doctrine of the church being the bride and Christ being the head. And so the mansion, this absolutely beautiful mansion, is drawing people to itself just the way Christ draws people to the church. There is a scene in it where someone refers, in the novel, to a short story by G.K. Chesterton. And it's a Father Brown short story. And Father Brown is trying to explain how he captured a criminal. And he says, I gave him a thread, and he could wander as far as he possibly wished, and I could bring him back with just a twitch upon the thread. Now, I think this novel, Brideshead Revisited, is very much focused on the image of God as kind of the hound of heaven, pursuing the sinner, this loving God, never letting up. And sometimes he lets the sinner wander as far as he or she wishes, but brings him or her back by a twitch upon the thread. So there are at least 4 characters in this novel who have kind of either drifted away from the church or seem to have drifted away from God. And everyone gets involved in this drama with God. I'll just tell you about one. One is Lord Marchmain, who is the master of this magnificent mansion. And as most of the novel takes place 25 years after Lord Marchmain has left. He's left the church. He's taken up with a mistress. He apparently literally hates his wife. He can't even go back into England because she's living there. He can't go back to the castle because she's there. And he mocks the church. He makes fun of the church. And now he is very, very, very sick. And his wife has died. And he goes back to the castle, really to die. And he's a mixture of, he's trying to persuade himself, he's not going to die. And when they bring the doctor in, one of the characters says, "Doesn't Lord Marchmain have a tremendous sense of joy in his life?" And the doctor says, "Do you think so? It seems to me to be more like fear." And then as the novel progresses, there's a big dispute in the family. Should we get the priest to come and anoint him? And some people say, no, he left the church, he ridiculed the church and so on. But others have this kind of deep down Catholic feeling that at the moment of death, they want to have a priest around. So they do get the priest, excuse me, and by that time, Lord Marchmain is in a coma. So the priest comes and he whispers in Marchmain's ear, give me some sign that you're sorry for your sins and you want absolution. Now I'm going to read the page in the novel. Maybe I should warn you that this is a spoiler, but I have to do this. When I read this in class every year, I have the darndest time not crying. I mean, I find this scene so powerful and so moving. So the priest is whispering in Marchmain's ear. There's no sign from Marchmain. He seems to be in a coma. And then the character, let me tell you about these 2 characters. Charles Ryder, who is the narrator of the novel, and Julia, who is the daughter of Lord Marchmain, are having an illicit love affair. And Ryder has fought the fact that some people want to bring the priest, because he knows that somehow, if the priest comes, his love affair with Julia is going to be ruined. So he's at the deathbed of Marchmain, and so is his lover, Julia. And she's praying that Marchmain will give some sign that he wants to be reconciled to the church. And the main character, Charles Ryder, he's not even sure that he believes in God. Suddenly he feels the need to pray for a sign. So I'm going to read this paragraph, which I think is just great. I suddenly felt the longing for a sign, if only of courtesy, if only for the sake of the woman I loved, who knelt in front of me, praying, I knew, for a sign. It seemed so small a thing that was asked, the bare acknowledgement of a present, a nod in a crowd. All over the world, people were on their knees before innumerable crosses, and here the drama was being played again by two men, really by one, and he nearer death than life. The universal drama in which there is only one actor. And then Marchmain begins, the priest anoints Marchmain's forehead, and Marchmain begins to move his hand up, and this character, Charles Ryder, says, oh no, he's afraid he's going to wipe away the oil. And he says, oh dear God, don't let him do that. Let him make a sign. And Marchmain, of course, is making the sign of the cross. I don't know how powerfully that hits college students, but it hits me very powerfully. I just think it is a very dramatic, beautiful scene. There is a series of 11 shows on television, PBS, on Brideshead Revisited. It's the best thing that has ever been on television. Jeremy Irons plays Charles Ryder. Laurence Olivier, who arguably is one of the greatest actors of the 20th century, he plays Lord Marchmain. And it's just, as I say, I think it's the best thing that ever appeared on television. So now that I have the students read Barron's essay, and they see what Brideshead stands for, the bride is the church and the head is Christ, that it's a very Pauline image, it illuminates the entire novel. So when I was preparing this lecture today, I thought of the castle as a representation of Christ in the church. I thought of that phrase that Rudolf Otto uses, that wherever you find the holy, you find a mystery that is frightening, but also seductive. And I think that's the picture that Evelyn Waugh gives of the castle. It's frightening because the church is going to make demands if you make a commitment, but it's also seductive. There's a kind of, there's a beauty, of course, to Christ, and there's a beauty to the church. And the characters in the novel seem to sense that. But when they begin to see what this is going to cost them in their lives, the sacrifices they're going to have to make, some of them move back. For example, Lord Marchmain. As I say, he left his wife and he took up with the mistress. And the other three characters who are involved with the twitch upon the thread, each one of them has some moral problem or some faith problem. But the presence of God in their lives is, I think, very, very strong. I keep thinking of Pope Francis' wonderful line. He said, I am certain that God is part of everyone's life. Now, let me warn you about this TV series. It's a TV series, 11 parts. About 5 or 6 years ago, some people made a feature film of Brideshead Revisited. And in one Catholic magazine, the reviewer said, this film has been made by nincompoops. And what she meant was this: they missed the whole point of the novel. There's very little reference to Marchmain's Catholicism in the movie, or to anybody's Catholicism. There's very little, if any, idea of God being involved in people's lives. They took out of the story the most important part. And you have to wonder, are we in such a secular society that Catholic novels are not only appreciated, but a large part of the reading audience won't even understand them? You know the famous line from Flannery O'Connor. In a secular society, she said, for the blind, you write with large letters, and for the deaf, you yell. It's the only way you can get your message across to them. And when I watched this movie, I took my niece, and she loves the novel Brideshead Revisited. And each of us couldn't believe that the people who made the movie thought they were making a movie, based on this novel. It was almost unrecognizable. So I think in this series on the Catholic novel, we have a number of terrific novels. I don't know whether they're all masterpieces, but I do think this one is. And test me on it, okay? When you have time, read it. And once again, let me warn you, maybe the beginning you will find a little slow. But once it gets into the religious drama, this is really a magnificent novel, really terrific. The love affair between Charles and Julia is illicit for two reasons, really. He was married and divorced, and she is married and divorced. And as they move, as the drama centers around Lord Marchmain, I have a sense that each somehow suspects that if Marchmain comes back to the church, this is going to somehow lead his daughter Julia back to the church, which of course will terminate the love affair. So it's a little bit like a theological detective story. What's going to happen, who's going to change, who's going to convert, who's going to come back. Now in the television series, I think Laurence Olivier is really magnificent. It seems to me there some British actors, Olivier, Alec Guinness, Ralph Richardson, John Gielgud, there's every inch of their body they are acting with. And though Olivier's, I'm going to take a guess, Olivier's probably on screen maybe an hour of the 11-part series. But in that hour, you can't take your eyes off him. He's just magnificent. And he seems to have understood the part of Marchmain very, very well. The style, of course, Evelyn Waugh was known as a terrific stylist. And it's parts of it I think you could read aloud. It's just so beautifully written. Some students in my course at St. John's think that the novel is too long, that it could be cut down. I don't think so. It's deliberate. Waugh deliberately, I think, takes us into incidents and actions and phases of different people's lives that don't seem immediately relevant. They don't seem immediately important. But I think what he's trying to do is give us a sense of the providence of God. That all of this is part of the providence of God, leading, back to, quote unquote, Brideshead, leading back to the church and back to Christ. So I wouldn't, if an editor asked me to cut parts of this, I wouldn't cut a line. I really wouldn't. I think Waugh has everything. I think everything is there for a purpose. If parts of it revolt you, as they did apparently this priest who was in college, was a professor at college. Okay, that's okay. I mean, sin is revolting, but eventually I think you're going to find it inspiring. So let me strongly encourage you, read the novel. If you want, watch the TV series first, but do read the novel. It's terrific.